Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hey there, just before we get into the podcast, a quick reminder, we could use your financial help. Please support us on Patreon so we can keep on keeping on. Check the Patreon links to donate. Hope you enjoy this episode. And hello again, welcome back. This is another edition of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. Today from down Illinois way, it's Paul Barthel is on the line with us. A book called Never Left Behind, and we'll get into that in a few moments. But Paul, hello, perhaps you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, where life began for you, and your 30-year career in kitchens.
Of course. Well, first off, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. So where the book actually began, or how I started, was I've been a chef pretty much for the last 33 years of my life. And through that, I learned a lot of skills in the kitchen. I was able to transfer that into my life skills as well. And from that, which developed into those skills, and I was able to format into a book form, was near the ending of those 30-something odd years after owning my own restaurant and working at large properties and various restaurants, doing larger events and volume type cooking. I happened to unfortunately go through an arduous divorce, losing my dog, which led to the book that we're discussing today. But so going back on my background, I have a culinary school degree and heavy chef background, and that's what I've been primarily doing my whole life, is working in both front of the house and back of the house in kitchens and restaurants.
Now, back when you were a youngster, did you have pets in the household as a kid?
Yeah, like most people, you know, we had the dogs. It changed somewhat when we moved to Wyoming. As you probably are familiar with, being somewhat more in a suburban type setting out in the country and so forth, we did have some chickens, and we dabbled with farming after leaving Chicago, for all places, going to Wyoming. So here we are in the city now, moving out to Wyoming of all places, and where we thought we would be farmers.
And that didn't quite work out, or?
I didn't say it didn't necessarily work out, but for instance, we dabbled in chicken farming. We would sell the eggs and so forth. I put a sign, just like you see in some country settings, there'd be a sign on the side of the road, eggs for sale. And then we would also butcher the chickens, and we wouldn't raise any type of livestock, but we were certainly around it. Corn was aplenty around us, and cattle and sheep and so forth was all around us at the same time.
Yeah, I had sort of a similar background out in the country a little bit, and dogs and cats always around us, and stuff like that. So that's I know of what you speak. I didn't raise any corn to sell or eggs or anything like that, but something similar. So you started out in Chicago. So are you a White Sox fan or a Cubs fan?
Boy, that's a tricky question. I have to be careful with that. Which way the wind blows. I'm a Chicago fan, but probably a Southside White Sox. So if you're familiar, I see you did some time in Illinois as well. From what I understand, you went to Western Illinois University, so you're somewhat familiar with the area.
Well, actually, I did all of that through distant learning.
Okay.
So I've never been to. I graduated from Western Illinois, but never actually been there. Go Leathernecks.
Okay, I wasn't quite certain. Yeah,
right.
Okay. But yeah, I'm a Chicago fan. It's always nice to see either team win. Yeah, certainly the Cubs are more fun.
Ah, right. And their long-time World Series drought finally ended a couple of years ago, so You got
It did.
you got the Cubs
Yeah,
World Series win and Donald Trump at the same time. So
yeah, this is true. We also got a Trump Tower downtown Chicago. So,
oh boy.
quite an interesting town.
Yes, that's that toddling town. Now, the book is called Never Left Behind. And Pepper, I take it, was the dog involved?
Yes, Pepper was the dog involved. It was a dog that we mutually had during the marriage. Now, I'm careful not to, make any disparaging remarks or any claims against the other person. Many of us, over 50-something%, have been involved in a divorce. And if you've read the book, it's not necessarily about the divorce. It's about the separation that I experienced and the lack of resources when one loses a pet through divorce unwillingly. The lack of laws and the rights, basically the rights that animals don't have. So that's where it all somewhat begins.
So I understand you had a bit of a struggle to. Now, did you actually? I was going to say obtain possession of Pepper, or how did that initial case all work out?
Yeah, it goes into depth in the book, and it describes the lack of resources available, and I poured over case histories of similar cases where people had lost their pets. For instance, one gentleman spent upwards of $90,000, was separated from his, I believe it was two dash hounds for upwards of 4 years. And people say, well, why just not get another dog, or why would you spend such an astronomical amount of money on a dog? And they're like our children. If you love your pet and you understand where I'm coming from, it's not as simple as just saying get another cat or get another dog. So to answer that question, there were no resources, and I was separated, and unfortunately the dog was used as a tool, a leverage. So for 3 years we were separated.
And so this resulted in a law recognizing pets in the best interest of the animal in domestic cases. Do I have that right?
To some degree. At the same time, there was a compassionate senator from the state of Illinois that was also, she's a strong advocate for animal rights. I have to be careful with this because some people, you can touch the nerve on a lot of people when you start talking about rights of animals, certainly with farmers, and I try not to preach. We all have our own philosophies, but the book describes my own story and perhaps my own sentiments about animal rights and how we treat animals. So what eventually happened was she indoctrined, she pushed for I believe it was the second state behind California, that pets are recognized in divorce as living, breathing beings. Prior to that, they're recognized simply as a table, a lamp, mere property. And so through this law, at least, we gained the recognition that it's looking in the best interest of the animal, who fed the pet, who walked the pet, and so forth. It delves into the person that took responsibility and cared for the pet the most.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. It's not like a lamp or a table or the second TV set when you've got, like running around our house right now, we have a dog and 2 cats. And I don't know what I'd do if such a situation arose. I can't just say, okay, I'll get the lamp from the basement and the TV set, and you get the pickup truck, and you get the dog, and I'll have one half of a cat. Yeah, you can't divide them up that way because, like you said, they're your friends, your pals, your buddies. You're part of the family.
Yeah, from what I understand, you have a cat named Henry. Is that correct? Or
we got
is
Henry
still with you?
Yeah, Henry is with us, and Harley, and then a dog named Holly. And why we got stuck with these H names, I have no idea how that happened. It just did. So, and they're all rescues of one sort or another. So.
Okay.
They're just
I'm sure you can identify where it comes from. And to clarify, I'm not a bleeding heart liberal where I'm lying on the streets protesting that or demanding that you succumb to my views or hugging trees, if you will. But in fact, the law was suggested that it would be paid by the litigants, the arbitrator at least. If you choose to fight for your dog, it should involve no taxpayer money. That if the litigants choose to, I'm not too fond of the word fight, but if they choose to litigate over the dog or cat, that they use their own monies to pay for the arbitrator, and the arbitrator would then submit that to the judge, the best findings based off that.
Yes, and I think I know what you mean. It's like we all understand, most of us, you have a steak or something for supper, that's fine, but you don't want to separate the family pets from one another or from the person who kind of looks after them the most. So yeah, there is something different there. And just a reminder, it's Paul Barthel is with us. Never Left Behind is the book, and about the fight to get reunited, so to speak, with his dog Pepper. Can you describe Pepper to us? What kind of dog is he or she or was?
Yeah, he's male, and he's special to me, just like all our pets are special to each of us. I don't expect anyone else to see that he is any more special or worthy, but to each of, within our own families, we have our own pets, and they're special to each of us. So he's a male Labrador Retriever, a chubby one by that. So, yeah.
And what color is he?
He's a black lab.
Black lab. Oh,
black
okay.
Lab.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. We have Holly is black. She's a flat-coated retriever, apparently. But
wow.
Nobody knows for sure because she has a little bit of a collie in her, most people think. So I guess, like you said, most people would wonder why you would fight so hard to keep Pepper. What's so special about the guy?
Just the separation and the alienation that I probably didn't want to experience at the time, just to letting him go. I was with him all those years, working 14 hours a day in restaurants, upwards of 14 hours a day. I'd come home and, well, you could walk your dog for 5 minutes and he loves you to death, and that's all they ask of you. So to be clear, the book is not so much a sad book going into losing your pet or the trials of a divorce. In fact, there's been some reviewers that said, boy, he talks about restaurants a lot. There is a lot of chapters that go into what takes place behind the scenes in restaurants. It's sort of like building up to a memoir, building up to when I actually lost the dog, and the strength that I was able to gain by working on the line in those various kitchens and some of the derelict places and so forth. I liken it to Anthony Bourdain's
right.
Was it no Kitchen Confidential?
Kitchen Confidential, yes. So
there's a lot that I discuss in the book exposing what takes place behind the walls in kitchens, and then it goes into losing the dog.
And it's Never Left Behind, Paul Barthel, and you can find it online, I suppose, or
yeah, it's in it's doing fairly well. It's on Amazon, of course, but it's also at Books A Million, Barnes and Noble. I'll be signing books this Thursday at Barnes and Noble, and next week authors on the Riverwalk. So it's doing good. It's in select bookstores. So you can find it online everywhere.
Yes, and we'll get to that in a moment. But back to restaurants and kitchens for a moment. So did you actually, I think there's a picture of you with Anthony Bourdain. Did you all actually get to know him fairly well? Or?
I'd be lying if I say we were friends. I happened to meet him a couple times. One was at, I think it was a book signing, and the other one was in a restaurant, a tasting that we both had attended. And the conversation was light, but the man is He's just like me. He's a man's man, the type that you could go out for a beer with and have just like he presents himself on TV.
Well, that's all we ever saw him doing was drinking, eating, and smoking. And what's wrong with that? I guess, except for the smoking part right. For me. But because
Understood.
Drinking and eating, two of my favorite pastimes. I mean, why not?
Yep.
Speaking of kitchens and restaurants for a moment, do you have anything, any little tips or suggestions, things we should kind of watch for when we go out for a nice little meal?
Of course, yeah. Never. Well, this is my analogy. Never go into a restaurant that's too busy, and that's kind of common sense. Many times, from my experience working in the kitchen, we cannot give as much attention to your plate detail when we're getting slammed, and it's just more of pushing the food out rather than monitoring each plate. In fact, I prefer it when it's a little not slower. I thrive on the kitchen, the camaraderie and the excitement and the adrenaline, but to give plate detail and watch over each plate is much preferred than pushing the food out. And of course, never go in restaurants on Monday because you're typically getting Friday's fish that's left over.
Right. Unless you're going for a pizza. But that's another story, I guess.
Exactly, right.
Oh, what kind of pizza do they have in the Chicago area that's different? Is there something, deep dish or something?
No, I don't know if we're really known for that, Chicago.
Oh, okay.
I'm joking. No, of course. We're described as the Mecca for pizza and deep dish, certainly, but that goes without saying, or that's a personal preference. New York has excellent pizza, and they say Denver pizza is good because of the elevation, and here in Chicago, certainly we have good pizzas, and deep dish is what we're known for as well.
What is a deep dish pizza, if I may be so naive?
It's basically a thicker, softer crust with heavy sauce and heavy cheese. It's like a pie, basically, like a pizza pie.
Gotcha. And speaking of meals, what is your favorite meal?
That's probably the most common question I do get asked, and I can't. Yeah, no, that's okay. I can't say there's any one particular meal. It's what I've always enjoyed doing was soups. I like to think that I excel at soups, and I like the flavoring and all the pairings with the various food elements that go into a soup, the steaming and the hours behind it that it's similar to like a wine. It takes time to perfect the flavors in a soup. So that's one of the things that I like doing the best in the kitchen.
And Paul Barthel is with us, Never Left Behind, the book about starting off with his stories of life in kitchens and then into the story of his divorce, separation from his pet dog Pepper, a black lab. It's sort of a story of a dog, a divorce and determination, I would say. Now, you're also working to get animal rights laws passed in different states rather than just California and Illinois?
Yeah, I have to be careful here with what I say. Certainly, again, I like to go back to we're not preaching, but I'm sure there's a lot of laws that we agree as humans that perhaps should be warranted for those creatures. And it seems as of late, there's a lot of new laws that are taking place that are sweeping, certainly here in the States, protecting those domesticated animals and so forth. So Voices for Pets, a non-for-profit, we try to focus on area laws around Illinois simply because we're not large enough. We don't have the resources and so forth, nor the time. I have a full-time job at the same time. So, like tethering laws or animal cruelty, it's simple things, or domesticated separation, like what I experienced, and many of the things you read about in the paper, puppy mill legislation, leaving your dog in hot cars, and things of that nature. We try to push for that. Similar laws are mirrored in other states.
Gotcha. And do you have any other literary projects in the works?
I do. There's a couple things. Like the book that has been out, just came out, Never Left Behind. It's sort of morphed into restaurants by fault. A lot of it, it is about cooking in restaurants, and then it gets into losing pepper. But I do have 2 or 3 books in the works, and the one I'm currently working on is the greatest canines in history.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I never thought of something like that. Yeah.
So it delves into Rin Tin Tin, of course, and the Lassies, but not so much those animals that just happen to be at the right place at the right time, or that have been trained to act. But of course, it gets into other animals that we're using our military and the police force.
Oh,
and,
right.
Yeah, of course. So, and Hachi, of course. I'm sure you're familiar with him, the dog that waited for his owner for years to come back after he had passed away for 8 years at a train station. That was made into a movie. Oh,
well, I can't quite place it right now, but I can picture it in my mind. So my gosh, what a story! A famous one up in Canada is The Littlest Hobo. That's a popular TV show that's been on for years. It's in reruns, but it was a dog who wandered from place to place, and got involved in various situations, and then went on to another town for the next adventure. So everybody up here knows about The Littlest Hobo. So.
I'll have to look into that. I'm currently doing a lot of research and interviews.
Sure.
It sounds very similar to I think it's Bobby down here. I think the dog's name was Bobby. Who, if you're familiar, the family was from Oregon. They vacationed, I believe, to Indiana. The dog got out, lost the dog. They waited. They could not find it. They had to go back home. They went back home. The dog miraculously found its way back to Oregon. 2,500 miles later.
Right. Well, the Incredible Journey too is a sort of a Canadian-based story about the. You probably have heard of that one, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. We'll look forward to those. Never Left Behind, the current book by Paul Barthel. What's your website there, Paul? Please.
It's pepperstail.com.
So it's Pepper's Tail, but it's T-A-L-E, not
there you go.
Not the kind that you wag, but the other kind. So
yeah, and then if for those listening, if you have trouble, you could just simply go to either Amazon, and then there's links there that'll take you to the website and so forth. And then just remember the title of the book. It does come up. It does come up pretty fast just with the title.
Right, and that's Never Left Behind. So if we don't remember anything else from this chat, remember Never Left Behind, and then you can find everything from there. Paul, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Any last words before we let you go?
No, I really appreciate having me on. You and Diane have been wonderful. I love the show. I've listened to several podcasts, and I love the title, Talking Books and Stuff. It's not so formal, and it's a very relaxing show. I love it.
Well, I thought it was a really, not really unique, because you can only be unique. You can't be more unique than something else. But I thought, that's a good idea for a title. And then I found out there's like a dozen others with that title in there. So had to work it a bit.
I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks very much, Paul. And we'll keep in touch and maybe meet up one day.
Very good. I appreciate it. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.